I mentioned previously that this chapter 35, was somehow inspired or inserted in its making the history of Eastern European modernity coming out of Poland, from this city, where this exhibition started. Two specific artists were at the center of interest, Katarzyna Kobro and Władysław Trzemiński. Kobro was known for hypermodernist sculpture, structural sculpture. She was creating open spaces with her work, trying to figure out how a sculpture can be an open, fluid structure. Here, she's inspired by Kobro. She made a copy or reconstitution of an early 1928 Kobro painting that she photographed and then printed, serigraphed on her own painting. Again, as I mentioned earlier, you see here again the edge of her own painting, which is also added to the image. So you can see that in this painting, in this work, you have almost a threefold artworks, where you have the Kobro 1928 sculpture, you have the work itself by Quaytman, and then you have the quotation of Quaytman within her work. So you can see how Quaytman layers reference into her work to create an image. Here you have another work where this interest in Kobro and her work and relationship to modernity, and also to the philosophy of modernity, the philosophy almost utopian of progress embedded in modernity. Here you have another example where the work by Kobro become the subject matter of the painting, or allows Quaytman to make a painting. The black shape that you have here is actually the outline of the Kobro sculpture, which is represented in the other painting, 1928, but just the outline of it. So from a volume, it becomes a flat, dynamic surface. Here, the Kobro sculpture is become almost an excuse to make a painting, to push painting in a different direction. If you look at the history of painting, actually, whether you look at Matisse, whether you look at Cézanne, whether you look at Courbet, the subject matter is often an excuse to make a painting. For Cézanne was the apple. The apple was just the shape that allowed him to challenge codes and convention of representation. Somehow, with Kobro's sculpture here, Rebecca Quaytman is pushing in a similar direction. The two artists that Quaytman is deeply interested in this chapter are Kobro and her husband, Władysław Trzemiński. Now I just want to show you a few examples of the way Trzemiński appears in the work. So here in this painting, these two paintings actually, the way Quaytman has been working is she took images of Trzemiński's painting, kind of more, not as hard edge works as Kobro, I would say more atmospheric, more fluid. What Quaytman has done is she has painted over the image Trzemiński painting. So here and here, under the layer of the white lead painting that she is using, and you can almost see that through transparency, you have an entire specific history of painting that she is either covering, discovering, or actually recovering to bring it to life. And we will talk about this notion actually of recovering in Quaytman's work. Other details here. First, for the story, this painting could be installed, as I mentioned earlier, vertically, horizontally, or tilted, as she did here. Again, here, the beveled edge of her panel are here, this time at the center of the representation of the painting. This painting was done for, quote-unquote, the Polish chapter. Poland is a very Christian Catholic country, and the shape here is actually very clear of what it is. Then there is another dimension that appears in this painting. Text, language. You have actually here the entire alphabet that follow this kind of necklace that wraps around the cross. The importance of language in Quaytman's work, of course, is illustrated or come from the structure of the work in chapter. But I think it's also difficult to ignore that her relationship to literature, to words, might be connected to also her own upbringing. She is the daughter of a very famous, very respected American poet, Susan Ho, and of also a very respected abstract painter, Harvey Quaytman. So when you see these paintings, when you see her interest in language, in a very specific history of painting, whether or not there is a direct link, but you see how all these elements from culture, history, art history, biography are compacted in this work. The other thing that I would like to mention in this part of the exhibition, I would like to bring your attention also to this painting behind me. I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the tour the fact that there is a relationship between Quaytman's work and the history of icon. What defines an icon as an image, and what will be, the question of what will be an icon, and what hides almost behind an icon. History, narrative, belief system. And belief could be actually in art. Doesn't need to be religious. But here, actually next to the cross, which is an icon, another icon of modernity, of 20th century modernity. Because here you have a Malevich painting that belongs to the collection of the Museum of Modern Art in New York. But it's not the Malevich painting as you know it. What she has done here, and she has asked MoMA the permission to actually X-ray the Malevich painting. So what you see here is what you never see when you go to MoMA and look at the painting. And for me, it's very typical of her work. I was talking about the way she covers painting, discovers some painting, and recovers some painting. Here, with the X-ray, she's actually discovering and recovering an entire history, an iconography that we never see when we are in front of the finished product the finished work by Malevich. And by doing so, she's also positioning herself, for me, in a very interesting position as an artist. She is between an iconoclast, someone who attacked the image, and an iconophilia, someone who loves the images.